Well, let's get into this matchup, and it has to start with the injury report, Chase, because man, the 49ers have had their fair share of injuries, and the Eagles have been bitten a little bit too, but they are getting healthier, it seems. So I know on the 49ers side today, Trent Williams did practice. I don't know. I mean, you can be the judge of the videos. Was he moving gingerly or not? But we knew he would give it a go at the very least. We'll see if he can put together back-to-back practices this week and eventually end up playing. Ricky Pearsall did not practice, although he was seen working off to the side, trying to get right for this game as well. On the Eagles side of things, what's going on over there? Who's practicing? Who's not? What do we got to pay attention to? And then obviously you can chime in with the 49ers side as well.
Of course, yeah. Trent Williams practicing, I think, is a huge deal. And I wasn't sure what direction we were going here because Ian Rappaport had reported just earlier on Thursday morning that it was highly unlikely that Trent Williams is going to play. And I know Ian Rappaport is more of a national NFL insider, but he's very tapped into these types of situations for all teams across the NFL. And so for Trent Williams to at least be out there, I think is a really great sign. And a lot of people would like to say that Brock Purdy is the Niners offensive MVP or Christian McCaffrey is the Niners offensive MVP. I might say Trent Williams. And it's easy to say the quarterback or the running back because the quarterback is touching the ball on every play and he's providing a lot of highlight reel-worthy plays. And Christian McCaffrey is carrying the ball and he's catching the ball out of the backfield. But in the case of Trent Williams, you just look at the history of when he's on the field for the Niners compared to when he's off of it. And this record includes the playoffs too. With Trent Williams, the Niners all time, 61-32. Without Trent Williams, they are 4-13. And so it's a huge deal if Trent Williams can play in this game, especially because I do think the Eagles have the pretty clear edge in the trenches with their defensive line against the Niners offensive line and with the Eagles offensive line against the Niners defensive line. And that's just what happens naturally when you lose Nick Bosa and Mykel Williams. So big deal. I don't think Trent Williams would be out there if he wasn't sure that he could at least play. I mean, he's a 37-year-old and that hamstring, it's a big element of the body for a guy who's that old, but also that big and needs that element of his game, getting out in space and playing physical in order to play in a game like this. And he just elevates everybody else along the entire Niners offensive line. We saw without him against Seattle, against an upper echelon defense, that Niners offensive line got exposed. Austin Pleasance didn't make a career start up until Saturday night for a reason. And Trent Williams is so good that he just elevates everybody else there. So that's a big deal. I don't think Ricky Pearsall is going to play. The PCL injury is so tricky because that's really what stabilizes the knee. And for a wide receiver who has to plant and cut and accelerate and decelerate, that's such an important component of the knee. And when he injured his PCL earlier in the year, that was in week 4, I believe, September 28th. He didn't come back until like the middle of November. And so if he re-aggravated that injury, we're talking about him coming back over the course of a couple weeks. I think that'd be hard for him to do. I know he was running on the practice field today, but it was more in a straight line, not really going hard and running routes. As far as the Eagles, it's crazy how healthy they've been under Nick Sirianni. Since 2021, they've been one of the healthiest teams in the NFL. They made it to the Super Bowl in 2022, Jesse. 22 of 22 opening day starters started in the Super Bowl. When they made it back in 2024, 21 of 22 starters from opening day started in the Super Bowl. And the training staff was on a parade float with a sign that read 21 of 22 starters in the Super Bowl. Now, it looks like Andrew Makuba, the rookie second-round pick out of Texas, is the only starter from the start of the season who's not going to play in this game. Nakobe Dean is back. Lane Johnson is back. Jalen Carter is back. Jalen Phillips was on the injury report last week, but it was more of a rest day because he didn't play against Washington because he didn't have a bye week because he got traded from Miami to Philadelphia. So the Eagles on their injury front, they continue to be upright, healthy, and strong in that department.
I wonder, there's got to be something to that, right? Like, this isn't dumb luck. I'll let you get into whatever you want to get into. I saw your post a couple weeks ago when people were coming at you, and now all of a sudden it's totally okay to talk about the things you were talking about when it came to the 49ers. So weird how that happens. Anyways, but Either way, the Eagles do have something in place that is allowing this to happen. It's interesting because I don't know if you remember when Jaquiski Tartt went and had that short stint with the Eagles during training camp, and he ended up not making the team and retiring. But he talked about the dichotomy in the practices, and he almost kind of praise the 49ers for having these harder practices, but
Yeah.
clearly what the Eagles are doing is working and what the 49ers are doing is not working. I find that whole thing very, very interesting. These are two very different teams when it comes to healthy rosters into the playoffs. Every single year it seems to be
Yep.
an issue for the 49ers, and for the Eagles not so much.
No doubt about it. And obviously, there are a lot of theories out there for why the Niners have been top 10 in injury rate every year under Kyle Shanahan since 2017. And when it gets to a point where they're so injured all the time, I think it's fair to question anything. And so that's why I've tried to look at all these other avenues and theories for why they're so injured. Obviously, it comes down to strength and conditioning. It comes down to athletic training. It comes down to recovery. It comes down to practices. It comes down to play style. What's interesting about the Eagles and the Niners, though, Nick Sirianni prides playing bully ball and having a physical team. I mean, the Eagles really hang their hat on being a physical team. They want to beat you up, especially in the trenches with their defensive line and their offensive line. But they're also a downhill football team with how they operate offensively. Well, the Niners are the same thing. I know Kyle Shanahan runs outside zone, but his teams are always known to be brute and physical, and they've been known to wear you down. Remember that stat in 2023 that every team that played the Niners the week after, almost every one of them lost because the Niners would be in these physical bouts with these teams, and those teams would go all out, and maybe they'd play in a close game, beat the Niners, or fare well. But the following week, they were worn down and really beat up because San Francisco really craves that playing style. So what the Eagles do, Nick Sirianni throughout training camp and during the season has a practice schedule that is very player friendly. And the Eagles don't really practice as physically as the Niners do. They won't tackle to the ground. There aren't a lot of long sessions. They try to maximize the practice sessions, and they're very smart about injury management and player health. And Joe Banner, who used to be Andy Reid's right-hand man and was the general manager pretty much before Howie Roseman was the GM, quote tweeted my tweet yesterday talking about the Eagles' health philosophy and the Niners' health philosophy, and how the Eagles is a lot different because I think they're a little bit more conservative and safer with player health. And he said, this is an organizational philosophy that the Eagles put a big emphasis on that they don't get enough credit for. So it's not just Nick Sirianni. I think it's the medical staff, which they changed after Doug Peterson because they were so banged up toward the latter era of Doug Peterson's tenure. I think it's an owner and general manager thing. Like, they really want to peak late and be their healthiest at the end of the year. And I broke down the numbers earlier. They have been, whereas the Niners never are. And so I just think that it's that. But I spoke with somebody who used to be an NFL trainer for another team in addition to high-level college programs for years. And I was talking to him because he's like, you cover the NFL. You talk about the Niners, right? And I'm like, yeah. And I was at the gym with him and I asked him, what do you know about what the Niners do? Like, it's not just bad luck at this point, right? And he said, it's not just bad luck. In NFL circles, it's pretty known that what the Niners do from like a weightlifting standpoint, some of the dynamic movements that they do with their weightlifting techniques from a physical therapy standpoint, recovery, and then that dynamic stretching prior to practices, it's known to be different in NFL circles compared to other teams. The Niners do this partially because they want to play that aforementioned physical brand of football. But I think something has to change from who the Niners look to be the head of strength and conditioning, to physical therapy, to how they practice, to how they stretch, because this really isn't sustainable. They've still had success despite all these injuries, but Jesse, imagine what they could do if they were just healthier.
Well, I mean, if I remember correctly, it's crazy we're spending this much time on injuries, but it is kind of a crucial thing here.
Well, it's a huge storyline in the game because the Eagles are so
it
much healthier than the
yes.
Niners, you know?
Yeah, and they're getting a lot of guys back. You talked about Nakobe Dean and Lane Johnson and what have you. Like, they're getting healthy at the right time. This is just what they do. But when you look at the 49ers side of things, if I remember correctly, their head trainer is like a hockey guy or something. So it's like, well, yeah, of course he does things differently, but is he doing things potentially for the wrong sport? I don't know. I mean, it's all this is above my pay grade or my knowledge. It just, something is up. Something is clearly up. And
Yeah.
whatever that is, I think it's cool that you went down the rabbit hole of trying to figure that out and at least throwing theories out there, which is more than what I've seen most people do. So credit to you.
Appreciate that.
All right, man. Well, let's talk about some of the coaching matchups because this is a fun one. 49er fans know Vic Fangio very, very well. Remember, Vic Fangio was the defensive coordinator here for Harbaugh and put together some fantastic defenses. He did try his hand in head coaching and, not great at that with the Broncos, but overall, he's always been a fantastic defensive coordinator. In fact, Shanahan wanted to bring him in potentially a couple years ago before he went to Miami. And now he's with the Philadelphia Eagles. You put out some great stats on Shanahan versus Fangio. From what I understand, Shanahan is 1-3 versus Fangio. He's never scored more than 15 points in those games, averages just 10.25 points per game in those 4 games. Why is it that you think Fangio has Shanahan's number? And especially, this is interesting timing because another guy that's had Shanahan's number a little bit is McDonald, and he just put on a masterclass last week. Fangio is going to be able to watch that film and go, oh, yeah, we can do a lot of those same things on top of what I already do well against Shanahan. Talk to me about this matchup.
It's a great matchup. If you're into X's and O's and the nuances of coaching and the complexities of scheme and play designs and the plan of play calling sequencing, this is as good as it gets. I think Kyle Shanahan has been and is one of the best offensive minds in the sport, and Vic Fangio is looked at as the godfather. Peter Schrager was on ESPN this morning, and he was talking about how Sean McVay has said that sometimes he can't sleep prior to a matchup with Vic Fangio because he knows that the matchup is going to be so difficult because Vic is so well prepared. He's been around the block. This is a guy who's been in the NFL for decades and decades. And it reminds me a lot of a defensive coordinator who Andy Reid had in the early 2000s, who was also looked at as an OG and a godfather, and that was Jim Johnson. Now, Jim Johnson, a little bit different than Vic Fangio. He was known to be very aggressive, and he blitzed a lot. Vic Fangio historically didn't blitz all that much, although this year he started to blitz a little bit more because he hasn't had quite the same horses up front along the defensive line that he had maybe last year with the Eagles. What makes Fangio so good? I just think that he has a great play calling feel. I think that he sequences plays really well. His defenses do such a good job of adapting and evolving to the opponent, and his game plans will change week in and week out. And it's dependent on the opponent. And I think that's what Bill Belichick did such a great job of during his entire New England Patriots tenure. And so Shanahan has had difficult times going up against Vic. 11 points, 6 points, 15 points, and 9 points in those 4 matchups. Last time they faced off was 2018. So it was a really long time ago. And I know some people want to point to the fact that Shanahan's starting quarterbacks in those games were John Beck, Jimmy Garoppolo, Nick Mullins, and RG3. All right, well, RG3 and Jimmy Garoppolo were 2 of Kyle Shanahan's starters in 2 of those games. And what we know is that regardless of the quarterback that Vic Fangio goes up against, like his defenses are going to be really, really well prepared. One thing that he said recently too, it's like, look, Howie Roseman has done a great job of giving me players and they make me look really smart. But this is a defensive unit that has been very consistent and highly productive since Fangio went to Philly going into 2024. The last 2 years, they're first in opponent's points per game at 18.3, first in defensive efficiency, first in net yards per attempt, second in opponent yards per play, second in opponent second in yards per game at 296.9. So the big numbers there. Points per game, 18.3. In the modern era of the NFL, that's really hard to do. And then he's held opponents on average to under 300 yards per game. And so what Mike McDonald did against Kyle, I thought was so impressive. I mean, he flummoxed Shanahan. 3 points, less than 200 yards of offense, little more than 4 yards per pass, considering how hot the Niners offense was with Brock Purdy. So expect Vic Fangio to mix up looks. He'll go man coverage. He'll go zone coverage. He'll tease blitzes. Sometimes he will blitz, but it comes down to him having horses. And what I'm worried about from the Niners standpoint is the Eagles defensive linemen going up against this Niners offensive line with or without Trent Williams. If Trent is on the field, obviously that boosts up the Niners offensive line. If he's not, I think that this Eagles defensive line could really manhandle the Niners offensive line, kind of like we saw Seattle do on Saturday night.
Yeah, absolutely. And this Eagles defense has taken even another step forward since the trade deadline. I mean, they went out and got an edge and Phillips, and it's really helped them out. Plus, they had a great player unretire. Now, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously a little bit older. Graham's a little bit older, but still he's a contributor. And on
He
top of
had
that,
3 sacks and 7 snaps a couple weeks ago. It was
I
crazy.
know,
Yeah.
he's insane. Well, he's just rested, really, is what it comes down to. Like, he didn't have to put all the mileage on himself during the season.
Yeah.
And then Aziz Ajalari, who's a guy a lot of 49er fans wanted last year's trade deadline, is on Philadelphia. People forget he's been on IR. He's now been activated. They've got crazy, crazy depth, especially as pass rushers. So Fangio has a lot at his disposal, and they've been even better since the trade deadline. Now, one thing I did notice is that you can run on Philly, statistically at least,
Yes.
a lot more than you can on Seattle. However, as far as a passing defense goes, when you just measure it by yards, Seattle gives up about 193 yards passing per game. Philly's actually better at 189. So they really might give Brock Purdy and Shanahan major fits when it comes to the passing game. That means that CMC and this run game are really, really going to have to be ready to potentially carry the load. If there's anything you can do against this defense, it's probably running. Am I right about that? Or has
Yeah.
things changed over the last couple of weeks?
No, I would say if there's one way for the Niners to expose this Eagles defense, it is by running the ball. The Eagles had a really bad performance stopping the run against Chicago on Black Friday. They gave up 284 rushing yards in that game. And Kyle Monangai and DeAndre Swift were just running crazy on that Eagles defense. Now, Jalen Carter wasn't necessarily healthy in that game. He had been dealing with 2 really bad shoulder ailments. He had to get procedures on both those shoulders after that game. But I just think from a scheme standpoint, play design, play calling perspective, I just thought that Ben Johnson had the edge in that game over Vic Fangio. And I thought that a lot of the Eagles defenders were over pursuing. They were a little bit confused. They were late to react. And while this Eagles defense since week 8 is number 1 in the NFL in points per game given up at just 14.5, during that stretch, they have given up 122 rushing yards per game. And so this Niners offense is so much better when they can get the ground game going. It's been a problem this year. They're 30th in yards per carry. I think that's more of an offensive line issue as compared to Christian McCaffrey not being good, because I think McCaffrey's had a pretty good year. The Eagles have had a little bit of a similar problem with the yards before contact. That's also been a problem for San Francisco this season. But Kyle Shanahan has a dynamic running scheme. Ben Johnson is kind of known as like the Midwest Kyle Shanahan. And so if the Niners can find success on the ground and they can just kind of like eat the clock and keep that Eagles offense on the sideline, the Eagles offense has really struggled to find a rhythm and find a footing all year. Then the crowd starts to get tense and they start to boo if the Eagles go 3 and out. And then the team starts to feel it a little bit. And then the Eagles the Eagles fans get on the Eagles and things start to get a little bit tight. And then the Niners start to thrive on that. And then they get the play action game going through the pass game off of the run. That's when that offense becomes really hard to stop. But as we saw against Seattle, like if the Niners can't pass protect or they can't run block, just forget about it. Like Brock Purdy didn't have a chance to do anything. And Kyle Shanahan tried to move the pocket to the right. He tried to move the pocket to the left. He tried to operate play action, but Seattle was just all over it because they dominated the point of attack. And so that's what Philadelphia's going to have to do. And that's what the Niners are going to have to do conversely. If they can run the ball successfully, I think they have a chance in this game as now 5.5-point underdogs. That line has gone up by a point.
Yeah, it continues to climb a little bit. Let's get to some supers here real quick. Abramos, so happy to see you. He says it twice that it's great to see a familiar face. Jason says, Chase Senior with the fair and balanced coverage. Who does he tap the keg more for? The watch along on Sunday, though.
We'll have a beer boot filled up, and we'll be taking down some beers for both sides.
Yeah, there we go. Tommy says, why win this game to be sent home by the Seagulls? Yeah, I mean, I listen.
It'd be a statement win, man. Going on the road
be a statement.
as
You
5.5-point underdogs. You
yes.
beat the Eagles. Like
yes.
There's some rivalry juices flowing. It would be a huge win for San Francisco. And I'll tell you what, the Eagles want to win this game too, given what happened in 2023. There's some bad blood there.
There's definitely some bad blood there. Well, real quick, before we get to the next topic, I do got to talk about our sponsor here, Sleeper, you can get a 100% deposit match when you use promo code LSS of up to $100. You can also get a free $20 play by using promo code LSS. Link is pinned to the top of the description. Now, here are the picks that I've made for the Eagles 49ers matchup. I got CMC with the anytime TD. I got George Kittle with the anytime TD. Brock Purdy, less than 235.5 passing yards. And Jalen Hurts, more on the 30.5 rushing yards. That's $10 down to win 102. I'm going for the gusto here. I didn't even give myself an out on this one. So you can tail me or you can fade me. Either way, make sure you use Sleeper and promo code LSS. All right, I do have a question about Jalen Hurts because maybe this is a 49er thing, and you are in both communities. You're in the 49er fan community, you're in the Eagle community, but I feel like Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni are highly disrespected by 49er fans, like overly disrespected. I get it. Like Jalen Hurts to me is not my cup of tea, Chase. If I'm building a quarterback, I do prefer the Brock Purdy style, which is, hey, playing a little bit more within the structure, a little bit more on time and in rhythm. But you cannot deny Jalen Hurts, man. In the playoffs, he's been nothing short of phenomenal. 20 touchdowns, 4 total turnovers. He averages like 234 yards a game. He's extremely efficient, high completion percentage, and arguably has outplayed Patrick Mahomes not once, but twice in the Super Bowl matchup. So talk to me about Jalen Hurts and the Brock Purdy dichotomy, the matchup here. What is it about Jalen Hurts that kind of makes people talk about him so poorly? And then also, what can we expect from him come playoff time? Why does he raise his game come playoff time?
Man, Jalen Hurts has become such a polarizing player. And obviously, since Nick Sirianni is a little bit brash and outspoken and he has a personality and he's not just going to be a flatliner full of coach speak, he rubs some people the wrong way. Then you have the big Dom element and people don't like him, especially among this Niners fan base, given what happened between him and Dre Greenlaw in 2023. I think a big reason why Niner fans disrespect Jalen Hurts and they don't like him is just because these two teams have bad blood. I also think in this social media highlight era world where everybody is so concerned with like virality and things looking sexy and putting up fantasy numbers and people winning their bets, that Jalen Hurts' game is just a little bit different. Like he doesn't have the most natural throwing motion. He's not going to go out there and slice and dice you for 350 yards every single game. Jalen Hurts wants to manage the game. He wants to be safe. He wants to keep the football under wraps and not give it away. And it's worked for the Eagles. So him and Nick Sirianni definitely err on the side of being conservative as compared to having this high octane, creative, innovative type of offense, but it's worked for the Eagles. Nick Sirianni's been the head coach since 2021, 5 years, right? They've been in the playoffs 5 times. They have 4 straight years of double-digit wins. They went to a Super Bowl in 2022, should have won, went back in 2024 and did what the Niners couldn't do, and they took down Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs and absolutely dominated them. In their worst year that they had together, they still won double-digit games. Coming off a Super Bowl this year, they were the only team to repeat as a divisional winner. They've been really consistent. Nick Sirianni's winning percentage among active coaches is number 1. It's one of the best of all time. Going back to the turnover battle, Nick Sirianni showed this to his team. The Eagles are 41-2 when they win the turnover battle under Sirianni. They win 95% of their games, league-wide 78%. The Eagles are 35-6 with 0 giveaways. They win 85% of their games. The league is at 73%. When the Eagles force 1 or more takeaways, they're 53-14. They win 79% of their games. The league wins 60% of their games. So you could talk about the formula not being sexy, but it works for the Eagles. They also play in the Northeast. You have to deal with inclement weather. And so you're not going to be able to put up crazy offensive numbers on the regular, and they're going to rely on their strengths. Last year, it was the running game. That's why Jalen Hurts didn't throw all that much and didn't have gaudy numbers. This year, it's been their defense. So why risk turning the ball over to lose a game when you can instead be conservative and rely on a defense that since week 8 is giving up 14.5 points per game. So with Hurts, like usually he's a story that a lot of people would rally around and root for, right? He had success at Alabama, then he got benched. Tua got hurt, he comes in, heroic effort, and he wins that huge game for Nick Saban. So he was cast aside. Then he goes to Oklahoma. He was in the Heisman Trophy race and nearly led Oklahoma to a college football playoff berth. He was a second-round pick for the Eagles, defied the odds. Nobody thought that he was going to be a good NFL quarterback, and he was MVP runner-up in 2022, and he's outplayed Patrick Mahomes in 2 Super Bowls that he's played in. And you ask what makes him good in some of these big games. I just think it comes down to him being a flatliner. And Jason Kelsey actually talked about this today, that in the biggest of moments, when the pressure cooker is on, he's got an ability to just be cool, calm, and collected, be very relaxed, but think very clearly, and his pulse isn't going crazy. And I think when the moment gets too big and the quarterback's pulse can get up and ratchet it up and that heartbeat gets going, that's when you get panicky. And maybe you throw an interception or you turn the football over. You make a mistake. For Jalen Hurts, he's like, nah, I got this. I'm cool. So Michael Jordan had that. Jalen Hurts models himself after Michael Jordan. I think you see that in him. He just has a championship type of pedigree. And just because he doesn't do it from a passing standpoint in a big production way, like a Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, and he can't throw it downfield with a rocket launcher 70 yards, doesn't mean that he's not a good quarterback. And then lastly, the one thing that everybody says to go against Hurts and Sirianni, they have Howie Roseman, best general manager in the game. Nick Sirianni doesn't do shit. Well, Nick Sirianni is a CEO head coach. Guess who else is a CEO head coach? Bill Belichick, Nick Saban, Mike Tomlin, Jim Harbaugh, John Harbaugh. Are you going to tell me that they don't do anything? There's more to being a head coach than just play calling. Sometimes I wish Kyle Shanahan could manage and oversee the game a little bit better because he's so in tune with what he wants to do on the next possession, always looking ahead, not being in the moment, not being able to have a feel for what is happening because he's so focused on calling plays. And Howie Roseman might pick the players. He's not coaching the players and developing them. He's not managing the game. Nick Sirianni's doing that. So I think that they both deserve their flowers.
Nick Sirianni's really interesting to me because you've seen the moments. The first time that I really recognized his personality, or maybe he had a dislike for the personality, was I think it was maybe it was the Super Bowl the first time against the Chiefs, or it was the NFC Championship, something like that. But he was going crazy on the sideline, and Hurts had to walk up to him and was like, bro, chill. Like,
yeah, that was in the Super Bowl
let's
against
not celebrate.
the Chiefs.
Okay, yeah. Let's not celebrate too early. Like, can we calm
down? And then a
down?
couple playoff games before that was like when he looked in the camera and he's like, yeah.
Yeah. I remember that. It was a fun
but I like the
moment,
authenticity. You know what I mean? Like Bill Belichick, we went out there and we executed. I hate that sometimes. Like, I'm glad
that actually wasn't him, oddly enough. You know what I mean? Like, that really was not how he was. You've seen him post that era, and he's really kind of shown his personality. It's like, okay, well, you weren't really that guy. You were just kind of an a-hole.
He talks about football and like jokes around. It's like, dude, like, I'm actually intrigued by what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But, so with Sirianni, it's like, okay, yeah, there's an immaturity thing for sure. I mean, at least from the outside looking in, but, ultimately it works. And I don't think, AJ Brown, I mean, you can talk about AJ Brown, more than me, but he's a weird one because he's gone out of his way at times to attack Sirianni and attack Jalen Hurts. But outside of him, I haven't really seen any player come out and say anything bad about Sirianni. And when people are questioned, in fact, they go out of their way to be like, no. Like, you don't understand how much he actually does to keep us together. We love this guy. So we may hate him from the outside, but internally it does seem like he's really liked.
Yeah, he's really liked, and the players really respect him. And another big thing about being a head coach is being able to build, sustain, and fortify a culture. Sirianni does that. And I was talking about the numbers of when the Eagles don't turn it over and their record when they force and generate turnovers. Like, that is an emphasis from the head coach, right? And all across their practice facility, there are signs that talk about ball security. So he is drilling this into his team at all times. Those are the things about being a head coach that people don't always see. Again, it's not just about calling plays. Like, if it were just about calling plays, Bill Belichick, Nick Saban, they wouldn't have jobs, right? But they're two of the best coaches in the history of football. There's more to it than just that. And part of it, too, is the relationship that he has with his players, managing player health, the practice schedule. He's a big reason why they've been so healthy when the playoffs do come around.
Yeah, and I personally do prefer a CEO style head coach. I've talked about that with Shanahan as well, but there are some downsides, and the Eagles have seen this. The year after they lost in the Super Bowl to the Chiefs, they lose both coordinators, and they really struggled because of it. Dan Campbell and the Lions going through that this year really struggled because of it. And right now, you guys have an offensive coordinator that is, I don't know how you guys feel about him in Philly, but it's pretty clear to me that this offense is struggling in large part because of him. There's way too much talent on that roster, Chase, for it to struggle the way that it does at times. I think there's been 3 halves this year where they've had negative passing yards. I don't even know how that's possible. It's like, and even like the most basic NFL fan, when they hear names on Philadelphia's roster, they're like, oh, yeah, I know that. Or I know that offensive lineman. 4 of the 5 offensive linemen are household names for most NFL fans, which is not normal for most teams. The Eagles have star power, but man, they really do struggle at times offensively. Is it as simple as, hey, they just got a bad offensive coordinator, or is there more to it?
Yeah, I think it's multi-layered, and the Eagles have the highest paid offensive unit in the NFL. And when you think about an offensive unit that has Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, a high-priced offensive line, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, it's unacceptable that they've had some of the performances that they've had. Number 1 and 3-and-out rate in the NFL as far as offensive DVOA among teams in the playoffs. They're 14th out of 14th. It shouldn't happen. And to the multi-layered point of that, I think there's been a lack of first down efficiency, which has been a problem. That then puts the play caller in a pinch and in a hole where the playbook gets closed up a little bit, and he's kind of limited in what he can call, which then leads to the offense being predictable. I think the offensive line has really regressed year over year. That's impacted the pass game, but also the run game, which is really the engine that makes this offense go, especially since Saquon Barkley came to town. Penalties have been a massive problem for the Eagles as well. I also think it comes down to player execution. There have been times where guys are flat out missing blocks, offensive linemen are whiffing, Jalen Hurts is making a bad throw or missing a throw. There's been a drop here and there. It's also Kevin Patullo too. Like when I talk about play calling feel and play calling sequencing, you can feel it and sense it when you watch a Kyle Shanahan or a Sean McVay on defense, a Vic Fangio, a Mike McDonald. There is synergy with how they call the game, and it makes sense from a rhythmic and flow standpoint. For Kevin Patullo, sometimes it's like run on first down, pass on second down. If it's 3rd and long, gonna be a pass. If something is working, why not go back to it? Kevin Patullo won't go back to it another time in that game. And it just doesn't make sense. Not calling crossers. Like Jalen Hurts this year, I think it was 31 of 35 targeting crossers. He was surgical, right? Which is big in this game against the Niners because they're so depleted at linebacker. But the Eagles rank crossers at the 3rd lowest rate in the NFL. How do you not do that? So the Eagles have so much more talent on offense than the Niners do on defense. They should be able to score 30 points in this game. But Robert Saleh is a much better coach than Kevin Patullo, which is why the Niners have a shot in this game.
Okay, well, question for you then, because if the Eagles lose in round 1, that would be a major disappointment. Does he get fired? Does Patullo get fired if they lose in round 1?
I think he does, yeah.
Okay, so a name that just happens to be available all of a sudden, Mike McDaniel. Do you think that's a name that they would heavily go after and invest in?
Yeah, I think Mike McDaniel would be interesting for the Eagles. Nick Sirianni, the offense is also a Nick Sirianni problem. Like it is his scheme, and he kind of has a way of doing things as far as his offensive philosophy. And it's very different from like the Kyle Shanahan tree of all the window dressing and the pre-snap motion. Sirianni values a dynamic running game, but it's more of a north-south physical approach as compared to the outside zone, utilizing a fullback and having all that pre-snap motion to kind of confuse the defense. So I do think Mike McDaniel could be a really good offensive coordinator for another team, but I think there are better options for him. Like I look at Detroit, that's a great place where he can resurrect his career. They have a bunch of weapons, and we saw what Ben Johnson was able to do with the Lions. I think the Commanders would be great for Mike McDaniel. You get to work with Jaden Daniels, who I know had a down year in year 2 due to his play. and his injuries, but I love what he did during his rookie year. I also wouldn't be surprised, and I would love this for Robert Saleh because I want to see him have success. Imagine if Saleh gets the Ravens job, and that's a defensive-oriented organization. He can run the defense. Yeah. Mike McDaniel can run the offense, and Mike McDaniel pairs up with Lamar Jackson. Robert Saleh never had a Lamar Jackson when he was with the New York Jets. The defenses played well. The offenses were bad because Aaron Rodgers got hurt and he had Zach Wilson and a bunch of slop. So I don't think the Eagles would go the route of Mike McDaniel. I think they would go maybe like a Todd Monken, something like that. But if they win a couple playoff games, like I could see them running it back with Petula because Jalen Hurts has had a different OC 10 times in the last 10 years, which is crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. It's so funny you say that. I think that's been a pretty popular opinion. I've thought it as well. I'm like, God, the Ravens with McDaniel at OC and Saleh as their head coach would be incredible. Yep. And then I thought about even the Cardinals. Like, could you imagine if those two go there, they're in division, and let's say they make a trade for, I don't know, Mac Jones or something. It could get interesting. It could get interesting. So anyways, there's a lot of different places. I'm excited for the offseason, but we are not there yet. Joseph Ernberg says, knocking out the Eagles makes this season a success. I agree with that, by the way. I completely agree with that. And Dazza says, how does an Eagles offense with so much talent look so mediocre all season? If that happens like the Bills game, the Niners do have a shot. Well, the Niners definitely have a shot. I mean, listen, this is not a perfect Eagles team. It's a supremely talented Eagles team. There's no doubt about that. But this is a far from perfect Eagles team. Now, maybe it's as simple as they turn it up come playoff time. We will see. But Chase, it is time. It is time to make our picks for this game. And I'm going to go first on this one. I'll let you mull this one over. I'm sure you've had plenty of time to think. But ultimately, man, I just... After last week, it's hard for me to believe that the 49ers offense is going to have an explosion anywhere near what they had the previous 3 weeks where they averaged just over 42 points a game. I don't think it'll be as bad as last week at 3 points, but traveling from west to east, you're playing an Eagles team who is the healthiest they've been in quite some time. They're at home. They just rested their players last week, by the way. I just don't. It's hard for me to envision a scenario where the 49ers just put up crazy points. And I think in order for them to win, they have to turn this into a bit of a shootout. They have to force the Eagles offense to play keep up. And I don't know if they're going to be able to do that with Vic Fangio on the other side and all that defensive talent. So I do think it's a close one. I think the 49ers absolutely have a path to victory here, but ultimately I am going to pick the Eagles to win this one 23-20. Who are you picking in this game, Chase? And what's your score?
That's funny. In my preview, I went Eagles 26-23. And this is why I think the Eagles win this game. Number one, they have the rest advantage, but that I think is huge because the Niners are a really banged up team. They're also playing at home, and the Niners have to travel across the country after playing in a really physical game against Seattle, in which they got beat up, and they come into this game limping. I just think that top to bottom, the Eagles have more roster talent. And I'm a big believer that the game of football oftentimes is decided in the trenches. Sometimes you have to watch the game from the sideline, right? Which team is getting that push? And I just think the Eagles have the clear edge in the trenches. And we saw that the Niners, with their defensive line and their offensive line, they were really bad and exposed against Seattle. And this Eagles defense isn't quite to the level of Seattle, but they're damn good. I think they've been like third best over the last like couple months behind Seattle and Houston. And those two defenses, I think, are Super Bowl caliber. And I just think if the Niners want to win this game, they're going to have to play nearly perfect, or they're going to have to have a game, like they did against the Rams, right? Where like they got a 4th and 1 stop to end the game. The Alfred Collins peanut punch along the goal line. Mac Jones had the game of his life. Kendrick Bourne had the game of his life. They were able to generate a couple of turnovers. Like that's what the Niners would have to do to win this game, because I think talent wins out in a situation like this. Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts are also 5-0 at home at Lincoln Financial Field in the playoffs. So difficult place to play. And I just think the Niners come into this game a little bit wounded, whereas the Eagles being rested really helps them out.